Good morning, Trekkies! I am your host, Josh Pritchett. Welcome, all Starships in the Alpha, Beta, Delta, and Gamma quadrants. I am a film reviewer for Movers and Shakers and head of the Northern Virginia Star Trek meetup, and this is Strange New Worlds. I am joined today by my good friend and co-host, Mr. Chris Pabon. Chris.
Good morning, everyone. Guten Morgen. Buenos dias a todos los amables oyentes. Buongiorno. I am Josh's co-host, and I am not an augment.
No, you're not. So, Chris, we had another brand new episode of Star Trek Strange New Worlds this week.
We did, Josh, and I gotta say, I am still loving it. It is a fantastic show.
Yes, and this one is called Episode 103, Ghosts of Illyria. I think I'm mispronouncing this.
Illyria. Ghosts of Illyria.
Ghosts of Illyria. Yes, and we had some very interesting surprises this week in this show. We found out a lot of interesting things about several of our crew members, and had some really great scenes. And so, without further ado, let's get into it with Hit It. So, the crew of the Starship Enterprise has gone to a planet called Illyria, as we said, and this is a race of people for whom genetic enhancement has been a big part of their culture for several centuries. Genetic augmentation or genetic enhancement is very strictly forbidden in the Federation, mostly having to do with the Earth's eugenic wars that are supposed to take place sometime in the 21st century. We saw some hints of that in the season finale of Star Trek Picard. But basically, genetic augmentation is anything like Khan Noonien Singh, which has a lot to do, as we'll see later in the episode, with Lian Noonien Singh, who is a descendant of Khan's. But basically, the Illyrians had wanted to join the Federation, but because of their genetic augmentation, it was forbidden. Chris?
So, they are on a colony of the Illyrians where everyone has disappeared. And the question is, what happened to them? And so Pike, Spock, Una, and the landing party are trying to find out what they can in a brief window of time, because the planet is subjected to very intense ion storms, which makes transporting almost impossible, and it's dangerous for humans. And so this planet seems to be a water planet because all these structures are built above bodies of water. And we have our first red shirt, Ensign Lance, who happens upon a vault where there seems to be some vials that have been broken. And while Pike has to go find Spock, who of course is trying to investigate further what happened to the colony, and he's come across some archives, Una and the rest of the landing party beam up, and the storm is getting closer and closer, and it's causing problems with the transporter. And here you see the brilliance of Chief Engineer Hemmer, where he manages to divert power so Chief Kyle can actually get the party on board. And when he is asked, how did you do that? He says, well, I'm a genius. So no modesty there, but the man is a genius. So the party gets on board, and Pike finds Spock, and they go to the beam-in point. But Hemmer's magic can't work twice, and they cannot beam them up. And Spock makes a very sensible proposal, which is run, because the storm is imminently upon them, and they need to find shelter. And so the one room they know that is intact is let's call it the archive or library room where they were before. And so the captain is pinned down. Una takes command of the ship, and it seems like they're just going to wait things out so they can get the captain out until Ortegas happens to come across Ensign Lance. And Ensign Lance headbutts a light fixture just to get closer to the light. Ortegas immediately realizes something is wrong and calls for sickbay. And then the scene shifts. This is really interesting. We see Una in her quarters, and she's kind of attracted to the light in one of her light fixtures. And then you see her stand up, and she's kind of almost like yanks open her uniform and starts glowing. And the possible infection, we will learn later, basically is burnt out of her system. Immediately realizes something is wrong. She calls Dr. Mabenga, and Dr. Mabenga says, well, that's I was about to call you because members of the landing party are beginning to show signs of an illness. And then we switch back to Dr. Mabenga, Nurse Chapel, and Una in sickbay. Josh, take it from there.
Yeah, so basically, Mbega and Chapel have determined that there is a virus that is spreading that basically makes people crave light. It is affecting their vitamin D levels, and apparently, Una is basically the only one who has recovered so far. Everybody else is starting to, get obsessed with the light, having to be near the light, and they have to start sedating them. Uhura is in her bunk, which we find is kind of this big sliding door, sort of like what we've seen on lower decks. And although she is initially infected, it turns out that because she was in total darkness when she was infected, the virus could not take hold. So Una makes the drastic decision to order the crew to lock down. Basically, anybody who's still on duty has to stay where they are. Everybody who was off duty in their quarters has to stay there. I think we're all familiar with that by now. Meanwhile, Spock and Pike are still down on the colony planet. The storm is getting worse. And they have seen something emerge from a volcano, what appears to be flaming beings flying outwards from the volcano, and they are basically, Spock and Pike are like, "Tell me you saw that." Yeah, and they're a little bit freaked out. Meanwhile, Spock has discovered some interesting information in some of the archive records that indicate that the Alarians had been reversing their genetic augmentation because it was so important to them to join the Federation. They really wanted to join. So because of that, they're willing to make the first step by reversing their augmentation process and becoming more or less what they were. But then back up aboard the Enterprise, the infection is spreading. Hemmer, who is blind, is even affected. He at one point tries to beam up a fragment of the ion storm, and attempts to, so that he can experience it. Una has to stop him and reverse the beaming process. She has knocked him unconscious and sedated him. And then we see Una do something very amazing. Hemmer is a guy who weighs roughly anywhere from 180 to 220. She easily lifts him up, starts carrying him through the ship on her shoulder like he doesn't weigh much more than a human baby. And we will find out later in the episode that Una is Illyrian. Chris?
Yes, we will find that. So, she takes Hemmer into the med bay, which has been expanded because so many crew members have now contracted the illness. And, Nurse Chapel's like, how on earth are you carrying him? And that's when she fesses up that she is Illyrian and that her biogenetic structure is bioengineered to reject illnesses, and says, you took my blood, maybe you can synthesize something to help all the people here. And Mabenga says, no, I can't do that, because the way it works is that immediately as it burns out the disease, the counteragent burns out itself. So he would have to have been there at the exact same moment, so that he could take the antigens and then synthesize that to make an antidote. And worse yet, he's saying that he is going to be needed to be sedated because he is coming down with the illness. And you see they're having a conversation where he's saying, "But you're a Star Trek doctor. I mean, you can do things." And he's like, I wish I could, but I just can't. And you see him; he's kind of attracted to one of his light pictures and says, "Please sedate me before, I lose control." And so, see, reluctantly does so. And here's where it's a good idea if you're going to tell a secret that you're an armament, to look for some privacy, because Laan overhears the conversation, and you see her getting up, and then you hear a warning sign that there's a warp core breach about to happen. And then she steps outside, she sees Nurse Chapel knocked unconscious, and she's like, "Oh my God, it must be Lahan." And so the scene shifts then to Lahan is trying to initiate a warp core breach, and Una's like, "Why are you doing this?" And she's like, "Well, because then the entire ship is going to be inundated with light." Well, yes, because it's going to entirely blow up. So yes, I guess technically the ship will be inundated by light for one brief instant before they all die. And so a fight occurs in which Una easily overpowers Laan, despite Laan's training and ability to fight, which was a reference made to before in the first episode when she mentioned she's a survivor of being captured by the Gorn. And there is a very telling conversation between them as Una has Laan pinned down, and she's saying, "I'm your friend, I'm your friend." And she's like, "Are you really though? Because you're an armament. You never told me this. And when I was growing up, because of my name, everyone called me an armament, a monster, and I've learned to hate armaments, and you all are monsters." And at that point, there is a breach of the warp core, and a dangerous amount of radiation comes out, and you see that again, her biogenetic engineered body is reacting to the surge of radiation and is basically expunging it from her body. And you see that Laan, who is underneath her, is sort of caught in this moment, and she is also getting a bit of transference, it seems, of the ability of Una. Meanwhile, the scene on the surface is not great either, because these entities that seem like, if you will, banshees, are trying to get into the room where Pike and Spock are, and despite the fact that they blockaded the door, they were about to get in, which shows some intelligence because they've not even been able to notice them in the room, but they found them in the room, and I assume they have to navigate through some structures to get there, because they're not incorporeal, because if they were, they could just pass through the door, but so they blockaded themselves in there. And then Pike says that his ears are beginning to bust, and it's the ion storm, which is right upon them. The window busts open, and Pike and Spock get to the ground. Not that that's really going to help them much. And at that same moment, the banshees, if you will, burst into the room and then swirl around them, protecting them from the effects of the ion storm. And they only leave once the ion storm has passed. And then the scene shifts again to Medbay, where they're waking up Dr. Mabenga, and Nurse Chapel tells him that she was able to synthesize an antidote because part of Una's healing abilities caused a chimeric reaction because of the proximity of Luan in Luan. So she's able to take the antibodies in Luan and synthesize an antidote. Josh, do you want to take us to the end?
Yeah. So we forgot to mention one thing here. At one point, Hemmer is going around checking all the transporters, and of course, there's a transporter in the med bay, or sick bay, I should say. And it turns out Mbeke is running something in the transporter buffers, and don't know what it is. And then he finally tells Una, when she confronts him about it later, that he has his daughter in the transporter buffer because she is suffering from a disease that is slowly killing her. And the only way to protect her, the only way to save her until he can finally cure it, is he has her in the transporter buffer. Now, longtime fans are going to remember the Star Trek Next Generation episode Relics, in which Geordi and Riker find Scotty had done something similar when he was when a ship he was on crash landed on a Dyson sphere, and he put himself in the buffer system in order to, as a sort of suspended animation chamber. And essentially that's what Mbeki's doing here too. So Una agrees not to get him in trouble, and in fact says she's going to get him a specialized energy power supply so that he can keep the pattern buffer locked and keep her preserved. Pike and Spock discover that the Banshees are in fact the Lyarians, who, when they were reversing their augmentations, turned into something that was not humanoid, but still maintained intelligence and wanted to save Pike and Spock from the ion storm. So they realized that this is when they realized that they were in, that the Illyrians really, it mattered to them. Joining the Federation was very important to them, so they were willing to sacrifice themselves to do it. Leon and Una have a heart-to-heart in the mess hall about her being Lyrian and her trying to explain the difference between the Lyrians and what Khan's people were. And Leon explains that she was bullied and harassed because of who she was, that she was the great-great-granddaughter or niece of Khan Noonien Singh, which obviously could not have been easy. I mean, to have known one of your ancestors was a mass murderer, and I thought that was really interesting. It's something I want to get into in the next segment of our show. And the episode ends with Mbeki bringing his daughter out of the buffer for a few minutes to read her a story. And so we get to meet her for a moment. And so, of course, obviously this is going to be a big deal going forward into the rest of the series. So, I just, our good friend Michael P. Wrote in, this episode should have been called Secrets. Well, he's correct about that, as we will now see in our other segment of the show, The Good, the Bad, and the Gorn. So, getting into what I thought was good, as I was just mentioned a moment ago, Leon feeling this sense of shame and guilt about being a descendant of Khan Noonien Singh, which could not have been easy. There are many people, I think, who feel a lot of personal shame knowing that their ancestors might have done terrible things. I'm mostly thinking about a lot of people from Germany who know that their grandfathers and great grandfathers, might very well have been active participants in the Nazis and the German military and carried out many atrocities. I think that's, something that, a lot of people that, people have to be able to separate themselves from, but I think that there are a lot of people that just are not always able to do that, and do feel stigmatized by things like that. And I thought it was really interesting that they decided to address that. I thought it was I love the fact that Una, I mean, this is the thing with Una. This is going back to the original pilot episode, The Cage, which is the first time we met Pike and that initial crew of the Starship Enterprise. Was when Pike says to Una, "You're different, of course," in reference that she's, a completely, different person from the young female ensign that was that was his yeoman at the time on Pike's on the bridge. And of course we never got into that. We knew that Una, who was played at that point by Majel Barrett, did have enhanced intelligence and was the first officer of the Enterprise. That but we didn't really know how far it went. And I'm sure this is something that adds onto it, and that, given the fact that Pike was very okay with the fact that she was uh, Lyrian when she told him, because she offered to resign, um, just says, okay, well, Pike's not going to tolerate this prejudice against augments, which, for those of you who recall Star Trek Enterprise, we saw, at the end, and also Star Trek Deep Space Nine, humans who are genetically augmented, who have enhanced intelligence and physical capabilities artificially, are oftentimes discriminated against, or not allowed into certain positions, because people are still very afraid, even into the 24th century, of the possibility of another Khan. So this is something people worry about, and it's a prejudice that many people, as Mbeki points out at one point, that this is a very common prejudice amongst humans and other Federation species. So Pike has decided he's not going to tolerate that, and he decides he's going to keep her secret as long as he can. Which, of course, we know he only has a decade left, so he's not going to, so basically, yeah, as long as he's there, he's going to keep her secret. But obviously, this is something that's going to come up again, and it's something that Pike may have to deal with, whether he wants to or not, later on going forward. Chris?
Josh, this episode should have been called the Ship of Secrets, because there's secrets across the board on this ship. I mean, we start off with the first episode finding out about Lahan and how she tried to hide her having to be a survivor from the Gorn capturing her colony ship. Then we find out Una is an Illyrian. We find out Mabenga has his daughter stashed in the transporter buffler. I mean, was background security checks part of the redundancy systems that were skipped when they left dry dock a week early? I mean, there's secrets across the board on this ship. I mean, who knows what secrets Hemmer is probably hiding, which we may find out in the next week or two. It is a ship of secrets. It needs an upgraded security check. But all of that said, I very much did enjoy the episode and have enjoyed the series so far, even if security is a little bit lax. So I did like in this episode how we addressed head-on the idea of labeling. That a lot of times, like, we assign a label or we assign beliefs to a culture that oftentimes we do not understand. Yes, the Illyrians did warn Gates in bioengineering themselves, but it wasn't out of conquest, as you mentioned. One bad apple does not make the whole basket bad. In their case, they just wanted to perfect themselves, but not out of idea of conquest. And I love the idea that was put forth, that instead of trying to adapt the environment to suit us, adapt ourselves to suit the environment, which clearly they had done on that Illyrian colony when those Banshees became basically ionic beings. Yes, it was an accident to them trying to reverse their genetic engineering, but they were successful in adapting themselves to the environment. So I like that. I also liked how Pike says at the end that there's a lot of stuff about Illyrians that all of us do not understand. So it's very easy to label a culture that we do not understand and say, like, oh, they're bad, or like there's this or there's that. But no, you really have to dig in deep and understand what they're about, which again, Star Trek is all about that. It's about finding new races and understanding them, not just encountering them, checking them off a box, and moving to the next race or next planet. Now, one thing I have to question: don't they have transporter enhancers at this point in time? Because they beam down, they know there's an ionic storm coming, that there might be problems with the transporter, but they don't have enhancers to bolster the signal. Or that aside, maybe the tech is not there yet. And by the way, I love the enhanced abilities of the transporter. And again, we mentioned this before, that we're not strictly sticking to what we saw in the original series. The original series had no emergency medical transporter. Bones didn't have it. But that's okay. It makes sense for now that we have the ability to make a better show for them to have this. I mean, just because they couldn't have it before because of budget or whatever, does that mean they shouldn't have it now? So I love that. I love stuff we've seen before that, they can beam stuff into Spock's, bloodstream directly, that they can engineer clothes for them to wear as soon as they beam down. And by the way, speaking of clothes, love the jackets. Oh my God, do I love the jackets. Like, I'm going to need to get myself one of those jackets. Like, it's like the Illyrian virus that attracts you to light. I'm attracted to that jacket, and I definitely need to get that jacket. But going back to the transporter issue, so I love that transporters can do so much, but apparently piercing through the ionic storm is not one of them.
Yeah. Well, I think as far as like getting through the ionic storm, I mean, you need a sense of drama. So we have had instances in other Star Trek shows where some sort of exotic weather pattern, like an ion storm or something, can block transporter patterns. So it's quite possible the transporter enhancers that we saw regularly on TNG and DS9 may not have shown up yet in the 23rd century. So we need some sense of drama that, we can't get around. And, obviously we needed something for Pike and Spock to be doing while everybody else is suffering with the light virus. That said, I don't think I had really any complaints about the show. I think it was pretty obvious. A friend pointed out to me the other day when we were talking about this episode that she was pretty confident that it was going to be Dr. Mbege was going to be having his daughter in the transporter buffer, and that or some really close family member like that. And I agreed, because somehow saying it was your third cousin is in the transporter buffer just wouldn't have that sense of drama that your own child would have. I thought that was good. I thought that was a really interesting. I'm interested to see how that plays out as well throughout the season and throughout the rest of the series, because I think we are into filming season 2 now, and they have been renewed at least through season 3, so we know that's going on. Let's see. I think that I honestly, no serious complaints about any of this. I think that just going forward, I'm really looking forward to seeing what they come up with next week and the week after that. But yeah, it definitely. I know there's a lot of continuity people, and I could be one of these people too sometimes, that are like, well, they didn't have this back in the original series. Well, yeah, there's a reason they didn't have this. They didn't have the budget. I mean, Star Trek was basically a low-budget sci-fi show from the 1960s that got by on great writing and great acting. It didn't even have the budget of something like The Twilight Zone or the first season of Lost in Space, which had much larger budgets. And yet it still stands the test of time, just on the basis of like writing and acting, which can add a lot. But I think in our modern audience, unless you have the effects, unless you have the costumes and everything, it's not going to have the same impact. If people are kind of like, okay, that back wall is obviously cardboard, and obviously the sets they have now, they look like, the original sets from the 1960s, only if you put those sets on steroids and gamma radiation and just, augmented the hell out of them, and they look beautiful. I think Gene Roddenberry's looking back down on us and thinking, yeah, that's how I really wanted it to look back in 1966. But, they did great with what they had at that time. But, now they're able to do so much more. So why wouldn't you do more? Why wouldn't you make those really awesome jackets and those really nice spacesuits we saw in episode 2? I mean, yeah. I mean, you can do so much more. You could tell so many more stories. You just let your imagination run wild. You could do it now. We could sell this. We can make it look awesome.
Well, Josh, I've always said say no to historic continuity preservationists. I mean, you can enhance and upgrade things to make it look better than, like you
Yeah.
said, they could, back in '66. Now, I'm going to go back to the jackets, and Gene Roddenberry, who's probably looking up from the sky and smiling at the show. But there's one thing he probably would not like, which is you'll notice his jackets have zippers. And there was one edict that Gene had, which was like, no zippers. I don't know why. Makes no sense to me. That's the, that's the one thing he would probably not be liking right now. Okay, but I want to go back. It's true, he did like zippers. I mean, that was on Star Trek Enterprise, the big thing. If you think about it, when Gene was alive, no zippers on TOS. There was no zippers until Picard got, I think, his jacket. But that was season 4 of Next Generation.
Season
At
5.
that point, Gene had already passed away. The big thing about Enterprise, to remember, is that their jumpsuits had zippers.
Yeah.
Big fan of zippers myself. But one thing I want to bring up with you. So we've already talked about the transport of the ionic storm. Why not send a shuttle down? I mean, you've got Ortegas, who boasts of being the best pilot ever in Starfleet. I mean, why wouldn't you send a shuttle down? Why did they beam down to begin with? Why wouldn't you send like the shuttle down with them, or send a shuttle to rescue them? Or for that matter, take the entire ship into the atmosphere, because there's no one living to spot the ship. And in the first episode, they took it into the atmosphere where that entire world saw them. So, I would have liked the line that said, like, we can't take the ship in because even with our shields, the storm is much too powerful, or like, it would knock out the systems of a shuttle. Just one line I would have liked to have heard about them saying, like, why these aren't options.
I think they should have mentioned a line there, Chris. The only thing I will say is, like, okay, I think in both, either taking the shuttlecraft or the Enterprise itself into the atmosphere, because of the storm, I think they were worried that might have caused a level of risk that just they couldn't, would be bad. I think that, yeah, okay, sure. Why not send Ortega in with the shuttlecraft to go pick up Spock and Pike? Yeah, but then again, that storm was approaching so fast, they might have been worried that, she might have not been able to control the shuttlecraft, and it might have been a much larger risk than Una thought was good. I mean, because obviously Pike and Spock could seek shelter and wait out the storm, and hopefully they'd be okay until the Enterprise could get to them. Again, also, though, with the Enterprise bringing that into the atmosphere, okay, again, it's putting the ship at undue risk, but also it would have to have its shields up to protect from the ion radiation, which means that beaming them up might have been, what they couldn't do that then. So it also, I'm not really sure what the effects of beaming somebody through an ion storm, how dangerous that would be to somebody. I mean, what effects that might have scrambling someone's molecules like that, and through ionic radiation, what that would do. So, but again, it comes down to a sense of drama. You have to have something going on that explains, well, why Pike and Spock can't be on the Enterprise and they can't get the virus, or it's interesting that obviously they didn't have enough contact with whatever that Red Shirt had gotten himself exposed to, that he was able to spread the virus. So obviously they were not, they were isolated, and they were, they had to do the second half and explain what the heck was going on here with the Illyrians and why they disappeared. So, but yeah, I see your point. Why not do this? Because obviously there's probably is another episode where somebody flies a shuttlecraft into an ion storm and survives, or they beam somebody out through an ion storm. But it's the ion storm is just a tool more than anything else. So,
well, I think Hammer probably said it best when he was talking about boosting the power for the transporter. that they run the risk of, when they're beamed through an ion storm, of just becoming a pile of genetic goo.
Yeah.
So that's definitely not good. One thing I'm going back and forth on, which is Mabenga, which again, his being able to have his daughter in a transporter buffalo means Section 31 really has been gutted after the events of the season finale of Discovery.
Yeah.
That why wouldn't he put her in cryostasis? Because cryostasis would do the same thing about preventing the spread of the disease. And there's part of me that thinks, okay, maybe he doesn't put her in cryostasis because he wants to be able to immediately administer whatever cure he's hoping to find as they interact with new civilizations. But it's a risk because, like, what if he gets promoted? What if this ship blows up? Like, what if he gets moved to another ship? He can't just take his daughter with him. So, I might have gone with cryostasis and come back to Earth when I found a cure. But I think at some point in the season, it's likely something's going to happen to the ship, and the only person not affected they're going to need to save the ship is going to be the daughter who is in a transporter buffalo. But I did want to talk about something I enjoyed very much, which is comfort food. Because in the intimate conversation that Lan has with Una, they talk about, and you introduced me to strawberries as comfort food. And I have to agree. And Josh, do you know what's the only thing better than strawberries as comfort food?
Chocolate cake?
Possibly, yes. So the second best thing is they are the strawberries that you grow yourself in your garden.
Yes. And you have successfully grown strawberries.
I have successfully managed to grow strawberries.
Good job. I look forward to trying that next week.
No, thank you, sir.
Yeah, no, I think everybody's got their own comfort food, and Leon, obviously hers is strawberries, which I think is amazing. I think, yeah, I think this crew's really coming together, and I agree with your point with Mbeki. Could you put her in cryostasis, or maybe figure out a way to rig up a transporter buffer system? The only thing I can think of maybe with the cryostasis is maybe the cryostasis couldn't affect this particular virus.
Okay.
It couldn't slow that down.
Right.
In which case maybe they could have had a throwaway line that, okay, this thing, it doesn't stop even in cryostasis. They've tried that. The only thing that seems to work to slow the spread of the virus or the disease is transporter buffer. In which case I have to ask myself, well, and this is this is like a lot of recent things I've been thinking about with the transporter. Couldn't you just, have a transporter genius like Hemmer and Kyle kind of get together and it's could we transfer the virus out of the little girl and beam that away and then she'll be fine? I mean, would that work? I have to wonder about that. Because as Hemmer pointed out, any exotic matter, anything like a virus or something else like it, the buffer, captures it and then kicks it out and then, does away with it. Doesn't let it, because that's why the transporter works like a decontamination chamber. So it does not let any foreign matter like that escape. Or as we saw in the episode Day of the Dove in the original series, it can distinguish out between Klingons and humans, so it can lock Klingons into the pattern buffer and hold them until you get your security team down there to arrest them. So I don't know. That's going to be some. Maybe that's how they cure the little girl in a future episode.
Perhaps. One thing I want to talk about, also mentioned in the good, is, and as we've mentioned in the show, budgetary constraints in '66 versus now. I love that we get to see different rooms. I mean, the captain's room obviously has to be grandiose. It's got its fireplace, its own bar, its own kitchen, because he's the captain. And then we see Una's quarters now. And Una's quarters, they're not captain size, but they're pretty big. They're pretty comfortable. And then we see the cadets' room, which is it's a nice living room, a shared living space, and they've got those little alcoves to go to sleep, which I imagine must, when the partition goes down, it's probably soundproof, visual proof, whatever. But I very much like that the rooms are not all the same, because even with Next Generation, I mean, the rooms all look the same.
Mhm.
But you can see that they're investing some money in here and some thought process. I like that for different statuses within the ship, you have different rooms. So that's a small detail that I really like.
Yeah, that I mean, I think Una's quarters look a little bit like Uhura's quarters did in the in the original series, but they've been enhanced a little bit. But yeah, they're if you go back to the end of season 2 of Discovery, and we saw what Spock's quarters looked like, they looked like they had 1970s style shelving, though, which I thought was a nice shout out. Um, Pike's obviously has a fireplace, and he has a full kitchen and a barbecue area. It's like, clearly, it's good to be the boss. But if
Yes, it is.
if I can go back and cite both the cage and the menagerie, if you look at what Pike's quarters looked like, they obviously they looked much nicer even back then. He even had a television set, which obviously, why would you need a TV set in space? But yeah, they definitely, there's a lot more thought. They're clearly not using the same rooms and just filming them from different angles. I mean, because you think about it, okay, Kirk's quarters and Spock's quarters probably were the same set piece. It's just they moved things around to make them look a little bit different, but they were obviously the same thing. So yeah, I like that there's some more thought put into this, because obviously, yeah, like we said, there's a much bigger budget. They can do a lot more things that they obviously could not do in 1966, including having um, going to planets where people don't look like humans. I mean, imagine how much better so many episodes from the original series would have been better if, okay, you could have slapped some makeup and a prosthetic on the gangsters from the episode Piece of the Action, and just let them be actually non-humans instead of, wearing 1920s gangster zoot suits. That, how much better that episode would have been. And it's one of my all-time favorites. But just imagine how much better it would have been if you could have done something like that. So, yeah, if you've got it, use it. I say, and um, oh, just on that related note, though, my nephew told me this morning that he has started watching Strange New Worlds, and after years of purposely avoiding Star Trek, decided he really liked the show. So I'm glad that he picked this Star Trek show to like. It's a
I
good
mean,
one.
set designs, costumes, special effects. I mean, they have put some money behind this show, and you can tell. I mean, I think it's up there with the quality that we see in the Disney Plus shows. And in a way, I think this also contributed to the demise of the Arrowverse and the CW, where you looked at their shows and like the budget levels were not anywhere near what we're seeing with some of the streaming networks. So, um, uh, they suffered in comparison, and sadly, some of the shows are no longer with us, such as Legends of Tomorrow or Naomi. But this show is definitely like here to stay, and I think the production values are just like are through the roof. Like whether we said it's jackets, which again I'm addicted to, and I'm going to try to get one for myself. The costume,
Etsy.
I mean, it's just that's part of the good. I mean, it really works for me, and it feels like the old ship, but it's just like so much better. Um, and again, it's because the technology allows us to do so much better. I mean, this looks in some ways even more powerful than TNG's Enterprise. It's because we have the resources to allocate to do it. So it's just the show, 3 episodes in, I'm totally hooked, and it feels like a Star Trek show. And I got to tell you that I am very close to inching it above Discovery.
Yeah, I think right now, and I'm gonna probably hear from some friends about this. I think right now, Strange New Worlds is definitely my number one go-to Star Trek show. Followed very closely by Lower Decks and Prodigy, then Picard, then Discovery. That's not. I'm not saying that to beat up on any of the shows. As everybody here knows, I'm probably the principal defender of Discovery and Picard. But yeah, they've definitely, I think, got a much better idea of what they're doing here. And I think that they've got, I think that, I think there's a real strength to the writing, and that is, okay, we're not doing a big season spanning overarching storyline like we did with Discovery and what we did with Picard. We're doing episode to episode, but there are all these individual smaller story arcs that pertain to the characters. Una being Illyrian, Spock, and many of the things we know that are going to happen with his life going forward, and Becky and his daughter, Pike knowing what the future holds, Leon's worries, Uhura, we know what's going to happen for her. But we don't know about a lot of the other people here, and so Hemmer and everybody, and I think we're just going to stick with it, and this is going, we're going forward into a new story, into a, the past remembered a little bit differently, but it's great so far. I think Pike is the captain we've been waiting for, and our good friend Michael P just wrote in, Strange New Worlds is so much better than Picard. Well,
I'm with Michael on this one.
It's not a contest. It's but well, yeah, I say that, but yeah, I mean, I don't want to relitigate Picard. Some people are getting tired of hearing me talk about it, but I think that, yeah, Picard certainly did have its problems. And thing is, we're 3 episodes in. Strange New Worlds is starting out really, really strong. Let's hope it keeps going that way. So I think this is a good point now for us to get into predictions about
Indeed.
what we will see in the next few episodes. Now, I've not.
With Team Michael on this one.
Okay, he's going with Team Michael. Okay, all right. And we're glad Michael is here joining us, even if it's just, thank you, Michael, for writing in, and please keep doing that. In fact, tell all your friends and everybody to tune in and watch us every weekend as we break down this magnificent new show. So Chris, would you? Yeah, and Michael's also adding the writing is so much better. Yes, yeah, it's definitely a lot tighter than we had with both Discovery and Picard. That's definitely true. I'll go with Michael on that. Chris, you want to start off with your predictions?
I have a theory, Josh. I think one sign of being an augment is that you have augmented strength.
Yes.
And we saw Una carry Hemmer to sickbay, just drop him there like a sack of potatoes, and Nurse Chapel is in awe. So I'm asking, how is it that you could, lift this man? And I was thinking to both you and I think those who know us would agree that you are very likely substantially much stronger than I am. So, Josh, I want you to come out clean in front of all the people viewing us right now. Are you an augment?
Am I an augment?
Yes. Now it's your chance to come clean. No secrets. This is not the Enterprise. This is a show of truth and transparency.
Well, Chris, by human standards, I would be an augment, but technically I have about average Klingon strength.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, you can't see the due to the lighting, you can't see my ridges and my long hair. But as many people know, I gotcha. I am a Klingon and proud of it. So yes, I am by human standards augmented, but I'm fairly natural as far as Klingons go. So
all right, that sounds good enough to me. And related to that, I think that we're going to see a little bit more about the augmentation that I think La'an actually does have, whether it's be genetically inherited or bioengineered, because Una makes that comment that you pack quite the punch, and If it was a regular human, I don't think maybe necessarily she would have felt it because again, Una herself is an armament. Um, you know, the ability of her cells to make chimera cells based on the Una burning out the disease from her system. I think we're going to find out that even though she says she isn't, but I think there's a little bit more of armament in Laan than meets the eye, which probably helped her survive being a prisoner of the Gorn. So one theory is that we're going to find out that, yeah, there's a little bit more armament in Laan than she even wants to admit.
I think that's possible. I think that, even though we here in the 2020s, we don't stigmatize the, or at least the majority of us do not stigmatize the LGBTQA community. There are still a lot of people in that community that are afraid to come out because they are afraid of being stigmatized. So I think that is a very interesting parallel for people. And I think going forward, I think that will be interesting. Michael has just commented that as the show expands, we will get to know the crew more. Yes, I agree, Michael. I think that we will get to know these folks a lot better and a lot more going forward. As the show goes on, one of the things, and this is going back to things I like, and this is something I criticize Discovery for. In the first season of Discovery, we had all these interesting looking people whose stories we didn't get into in that first season because I felt like being too much like Battlestar Galactica, and they were just focusing on Michael, Saru, Giorgio, the captain, who turned out he was from the evil universe. Heck, the Admiral got more FaceTime than the rest of the show regulars, and it's only been in seasons part of season 2, then more in season 3 and more in season 4 that they're getting more. Now we're getting a lot more stuff about all these other characters, not just Una, but also the pilot, and we're learning so much. It is a true ensemble cast, and Star Trek is so much better when it is the ensemble cast. It isn't just the Kirk show. It's everybody else. Even though Picard is, okay, it says Picard, and he is a major part of the show. It's also, a show about Seven and Agnes and Rafi and Chris and all those other characters. Maybe not so much now going forward in season 3, but it worked. Star Trek always works better. And this is something Leonard Nimoy said too, was that it works better when it's an ensemble cast. And, everybody, that's why, George Takei gets standing ovations whenever not just when he walks into a convention at a Star Trek convention, but also when he just walks into a room. People know it's Sulu. He's more than just the guy who was the extra guy that was flying the ship back in the 1960s. He became a real character. He became a very important character, and he became an icon for millions of people. So, yeah, that's why this is going to keep working and getting better. Is this this is an ensemble cast, and I'm glad they're recognizing that. So you're going to learn more about these characters going forward, and their backstories and everything. So, one theory though I have, and I don't know if this is going to put Pike in the best light, but I'm wondering if Pike is going to try to do something to change his future. I don't think he will. I think he knows, has Voke's son told him in season 2 of Discovery, you cannot avoid your destiny now. There's no way you can avoid this. This is what's going to happen to you. And maybe Pike is trying to think of a way he could do that. It is clear that it does scare him, but I don't think it's going to necessarily change the man that he is. Obviously, we know he's not going to be able to avoid it, but there's nothing that says that maybe he won't meet some version of someone from the Q continuum who offers him an opportunity, and maybe he's curious. So, not that we'll know it's a Q I mean, well, not that Starfleet will know, because obviously they didn't know anything about Q until the Next Generation. So, we will see, what Pike might try to do, or if he tries to do anything. But we do know that he puts his crew and his ship above himself. So, and that's going to be the thing. It's going to be the thing that leads him to save those cadets 10 years from now, is that he puts them ahead of himself, and he always will. But, as we know, it's going to be fine. So, Chris, what else you got for me?
So I think character development is strong in the show, and we're going to continue to see more of them. So we have two alien races on board the ship prominently, which is Spock being Vulcan and Hemmer being Andorian. So I think odds are that at least in season 1, we are going to go to, yes, technically we were on Vulcan like in the first episode, but I think moving forward, we're either going to go to Andoria or we're going to go to Vulcan. I think that we will go to one of them before season 1 ends. I also think we will not, sorry, Joss, see any Klingons before the end of season 1, because I think Klingons are still in a timeout, because I think we overused them a bit in Discovery. And easy prediction here is I think that before the end of the season, we will see at least one photon torpedo fired or one use of the tractor beam, because we saw phasers used in Children of the Comet in last episode, but we still haven't seen a torpedo fired or a tractor beam engaged. And look forward to those special effects. But so I think this is an easy one. We'll see one of them before the end of the season.
Chris, not to sound like I'm making any corrections here, but we did see photon torpedoes launched in Children of the Comet when they were launching the engine, those ion engines, to push the comet away from the planet. They did use the torpedoes to carry the launch. Yeah, and just to kind of a shout out, if you look at it, they fire it from the undersection of the saucer section, instead of like the tubes that we saw at the bottom of the neck of the Enterprise when it was upgraded in the first movie.
That's a good point, and I stand corrected. So I guess I'm going to amend my statement to say we're going to see a torpedo fired and go boom.
Oh, okay, yeah. Also, I have seen some of the upcoming, scenes from upcoming episodes. I don't know in what context this is in, but it does look like they do go back to Vulcan,
okay,
or at least, and Spock is doing the Ponfar and the Kunak Caliphate thing, where he's having to fight for T'Pring. And from what it looks like, it looks a lot like the original set from the Amok time,
okay,
but upgraded significantly. So we got that to look forward to. I do think we will see Klingons, because we did see a photo leak from Star Trek, and it was of a Klingon that looked like the TNG/movie era Klingons with the long hair and the forehead ridges. And we also saw a Klingon who looked like a TOS era Klingon. So we will see the flatheads and the more traditional looking Klingons. Do not know about first season Disco Klingons. We might see them just here and there, but I think they will kind of fade more to the background because of the events, But obviously, to all my fellow Klingon fans, hey, look, if you're still worried about the look, okay, just getting aside from the real world issues that went on to cause that, just ignore that. As far as continuity goes, you've got Hemmer's people who look significantly different from the rest of the Andorians we knew, and you have the albino Andorians, who actually go by a different species name than the blue Andorians, and they are somewhat different. So obviously, it is possible for several intelligent species to kind of evolve together on the same planet, and they all consider themselves Klingons. So I guess we will see all three versions of Klingons at some point in this show. As to why we never saw the Klingons we saw in season 1 of Discovery again after that in later Star Treks, who could say? Maybe they will address that, maybe they won't. It doesn't really matter to me at this point. Let's just enjoy it moving forward. We know there were some issues. If anybody wants to ask me what those issues were, feel free to reach out to me on Facebook or come to the, a Star Trek Northern Virginia meetup, and I will talk about it then. But, we're almost out of time here today. So, Chris, you want to tell them how folks can reach you?
Absolutely. Thank you, Josh. People can find me on Instagram at Verde Cosplay, or in 13 days, if you want to meet me in person and you're in the Washington, D.C. area, or not, but you're just coming to AwesomeCon, on Saturday at 7 p.m. of AwesomeCon, I will be running the panel, Who is Worthy of Lifting Mjolnir? Is Thor himself still worthy of lifting his hammer? Is there perhaps a villain who could lift Thor's hammer? Maybe it's Wanda. Could Wanda lift Thor's hammer? So, June 4th, 7 p.m. at AwesomeCon, come meet me in person and share your opinion about who can lift Thor's hammer. And in the meanwhile, you can follow me at Verde Cosplay, where, surprise, there's going to be a lot of announcements regarding Saturday. So thank you, Josh. So why don't you share now where people can find you?
Okay. Well, as always, I am the head of the Northern Virginia Star Trek Meetup Group. You can reach me either through meetup.org. Just look for Northern Virginia Star Trek Meetup. Or you can reach me through Facebook at Josh Pritchett Jr. Or also on the Northern Virginia Star Trek Meetup page. If you wish to request a membership to join, you can join us there. I will also be appearing at AwesomeCon. I will be hopefully in my Klingon regalia if I get it all ready to go in time. And I will also... Yes, I will. Oh, I don't have a panel at AwesomeCon, but I will be coming to your panel. So you will find me in the audience there. Also, if anybody is in the Stanton, Virginia area, on June 18th, I will be attending the Bigfoot conference in Stanton at the Expo Center, and I will be signing copies of my book, Bigfoot and Other Tales of the Supernatural. I will be there Saturday and Sunday all day. Would look forward to meeting you, talk all things either Star Trek or Bigfoot. Since those are two of my favorite subjects. So, okay, well, Michael just want to ask, who is going to SDCC? Chris, do you want to tell us what that is before we leave?
San Diego Comic-Con, and
of course.
Will I be going? It depends if I'm hoping to hear good news around June 15th. I have a panel idea that I put forth. So who is going? Ask me that question again on June 15th.
Okay. We will ask you that then. And in the meantime, we have had please tune back in next Saturday where we will be reviewing episode 4 of Strange New Worlds. Until then, kapla! Live long and prosper, everybody.
Peace and long life.